The soft glow of chandeliers cast a golden hue over La Fontaine, one of the most upscale restaurants in Raleigh, North Carolina. The air buzzed with quiet conversations, the clinking of wine glasses, and the gentle melody of a live jazz band playing in the background. Everything about the place screamed elegance, from the polished floors to the expensive suits worn by the well-off customers. Moving swiftly between tables, Emily Carter, a 25-year-old waitress, balanced a tray of dishes with ease. She had been working at La Fontaine for almost a year, but in her heart, she knew she didn't belong here, not as a server at least. Emily had a dream, a passion that had burned inside her since childhood. She wanted to be a pianist, to sit in front of a grand piano and let her fingers dance across the keys, creating music that would make people feel something deep inside. But dreams didn't pay bills. Instead of playing the piano, she spent her nights refilling wine glasses, carrying plates of expensive meals she could never afford, and listening to conversations about luxury vacations and investments she couldn't even imagine. The only time she ever played was in the back room, on an old, slightly out-of-tune piano the restaurant kept for decoration. After her shift, when no one was around, she would slip into the dimly lit room and let her music whisper her unspoken thoughts. The restaurant was packed tonight. Wealthy businessmen and elegant couples filled every table, chatting over their gourmet meals. Emily kept her head down and focused on her work, trying to push away the longing in her heart. Then the front doors swung open. A hush spread across the room as Vincent Grayson stepped inside. Everyone knew him one of the richest and most influential men in the city. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his life. Dressed in a custom-tailored suit, he smirked as he took in the restaurant. Vincent wasn't just rich, he was known for being ruthless. He loved power, and more than that, he loved reminding others that he had it. He took a seat at his usual table. Something, or rather, someone caught his attention. His gaze locked onto Emily. He studied her for a moment, then smirked. Emily felt a strange chill go down her spine. She had served powerful men before, but something about Vincent's look made her uneasy. He wasn't just looking at her, he was sizing her up, like a lion watching its prey. She didn't know it yet, but tonight, her life was about to change. Emily placed a plate of steak and roasted vegetables in front of Vincent Grayson, her hands steady despite the unsettling way he watched her. She was used to serving all kinds of customers, some rude, but Vincent had an intensity that made her uncomfortable. His smirk never wavered as he leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the table. "You seem different from the other waitresses," he said smoothly, his deep voice cutting through the restaurant's chatter. Emily forced a polite smile. "Just doing my job, sir." Vincent chuckled, swirling the wine in his glass. "I like that. You're not trying to impress me." His eyes flicked to her name tag. Emily Carter. Sounds like a name that doesn't belong in a place like this. Emily's grip tightened on the tray in her hands. She had heard comments like that before, people assuming she was just some poor girl with no future. But she wasn't about to let a wealthy businessman belittle her. "I'm happy where I am," she replied calmly, refusing to let him see her irritation. Vincent arched an eyebrow, amused. "Are you?" Before Emily could respond, the head waiter, Philip Dawson, appeared beside her, his face slightly pale. "Sir, is everything to your liking?" he asked Vincent, his tone respectful but nervous. Vincent didn't even glance at Philip. His attention remained fixed on Emily. "You know," he said, taking a slow sip of his wine, "I could change your life in an instant. A girl like you deserves more than this." Emily's stomach twisted. She had heard stories about Vincent, how he used his wealth to manipulate people. She had no interest in being his next project. "I appreciate the thought, Mr. Grayson," she said carefully, "but I'm not looking for a handout." Vincent laughed, a low, knowing sound. That's what they all say at first. He set his glass down and leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Emily, what is it you really want?" Philip cleared his throat awkwardly. "Emily has other tables to attend to, sir." Vincent waved a hand dismissively. "Of course. Run along, then," he said, his eyes still locked onto Emily's. "But don't forget, I always get what I want." A chill ran down Emily's spine as she turned away, forcing herself to keep walking. The restaurant felt suffocating now, the air thick with something unspoken. She had no idea why Vincent had singled her out, but one thing was certain: this wasn't the last time he would test her. And deep down, she feared what would happen when he did. The restaurant buzzed with life, filled with the scent of sizzling steaks and fresh bread. Emily moved quickly between tables, but her mind was stuck on one thing: Vincent Grayson. His words still echoed in her head. She wanted to forget about him, but that was impossible now. Philip Dawson, the head waiter, approached her near the service station. His face was tight with worry. "Emily," he said in a low voice, glancing toward Vincent's table. "Be careful around him." Emily frowned. "Why? Do you know something?" Philip hesitated before answering. "Vincent doesn't just come here for the food. He likes to play games. Dangerous ones." Emily's stomach nodded. "I can handle myself," she said, though the confidence in her voice wavered slightly. Philip sighed. "Just don't trust him." Then he walked away, leaving her more uneasy than before. Taking a deep breath, Emily grabbed the check and approached Vincent's table. He sat there, sipping his wine slowly, as if he had all the time in the world. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "Ah, Emily. Just the person I wanted to see." She placed the check on the table. "I hope everything was to your satisfaction, Mr. Grayson." Vincent ignored the check completely. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. Emily hesitated. "I'm working." Vincent smirked. "Take a short break. I promise, you'll want to hear what I have to say." Something about his tone sent a shiver down her spine. But against her better judgment, she sat down. Vincent leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I have a business opportunity for you, Emily." Emily tensed. "I'm not interested." Vincent chuckled, shaking his head. "You haven't even heard the offer." "I don't need to," she said firmly. His smirk faded slightly, but his eyes still held amusement. "You're a smart girl. Independent. But let me give you a warning." He tapped a finger against the table. "You can either be on my side or in my way." Emily's heart pounded. Was that a threat? Before she could respond, Philip appeared again, his face unreadable. "Emily, we need you in the back." Emily stood quickly, eager to get away. "Excuse me, Mr. Grayson." Vincent didn't stop her, but as she walked away, she felt his gaze burning into her back. Philip led her toward the kitchen, his voice low. "He's setting a trap. Don't fall for it." Emily swallowed hard. She knew Philip was right, but something told her that no matter what she did, Vincent Grayson wasn't finished with her yet. The tension in the restaurant was thick, like a storm waiting to break. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Vincent Grayson was up to something. Every glance, every smirk, every word, it all felt like a game he was playing. She stood near the service station, watching him sip his wine with an eerie calmness. Then, out of nowhere, a new figure entered the restaurant. He was tall, dressed in an expensive navy suit, and his sharp eyes scanned the room like a hawk searching for prey. Emily turned to Philip, the head waiter. "Who's that?" she asked, keeping her voice low. Philip's expression darkened. "That's Daniel Mercer." Emily had heard that name before. Daniel Mercer wasn't just wealthy, he was powerful. The kind of man who didn't ask twice. Vincent must have sensed Daniel's arrival because he finally put his glass down and stood up. He buttoned his jacket smoothly and walked toward the man like they had planned this moment all along. Emily watched closely as Vincent and Daniel shook hands. It was firm but brief. Then, without a word, they both headed toward a private booth in the back. Something about this meeting didn't sit right with her. Philip leaned in, whispering, "Whatever's happening back there, it's not good." Emily swallowed hard. "Should we do something?" Philip shook his head. "We stay out of it. People like them, they don't play by the same rules." Still, curiosity burned inside her. She wasn't the type to just look away. A few minutes later, Vincent emerged from the booth alone. His face was unreadable, but there was a certain confidence in his stride now, like he had just won a battle no one else even knew was happening. He spotted Emily watching him and gave her a slow, knowing smile. Then, He dropped a thick envelope onto the table near the entrance, Daniel Mercer's table. Emily's stomach twisted. That wasn't a check. That was a payment. But for what? She glanced at Philip again, but he only sighed. Whatever deal they made, it's done now. Emily wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but she had a sinking feeling. This was only the beginning. The air inside the dimly lit cafe was heavy with whispers and the scent of roasted coffee beans. James Carter sat at the corner table, his fingers lightly tapping the wooden surface. He wasn't just waiting, he was calculating. Then the door creaked open. A man in a gray trench coat stepped in, his sharp eyes scanning the room before locking onto James. Without hesitation, he walked over and took the seat across from him. James smirked. "You're late, Oliver." Oliver Lancaster ignored the remark. Instead, he reached into his pocket and placed a small, folded piece of paper on the table. "It wasn't easy getting this," he muttered. James picked it up, unfolding it carefully. His eyes moved over the words, his expression unreadable. Then, he let out a short chuckle. "So it's true." Oliver leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You're playing a dangerous game, James." James didn't flinch. "I never liked safe bets." The tension thickened as the two men stared at each other. The cafe's background noise faded into a dull hum, drowned by the unspoken weight of their conversation. Finally, Oliver exhaled. "Do you even understand what this means?" James folded the paper again and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "It means," he said slowly, "that we're closer than ever." Oliver's jaw tightened. "Or that we've just walked into a trap." James grinned. "Then we'd better make sure we're the ones who set it." He pushed his chair back, stood up, and adjusted his coat. "See you at midnight," he added before walking toward the exit. Oliver sat there for a long moment, watching as James disappeared into the night. The game wasn't just unfinished, it was just beginning. The old library smelled like dusty pages and forgotten stories. Ethan Cole ran his fingers along the spines of ancient books, searching for anything that could lead him to the truth. The dim glow of the reading lamps cast long shadows, making the place feel even more mysterious. Then, he found it. A small, leather-bound journal tucked between two massive encyclopedias. His heartbeat quickened as he carefully pulled it out, brushing off the dust. Just as he flipped it open, a voice interrupted him. "You shouldn't be here, Ethan." Ethan turned sharply. Standing in the doorway was a man in a black coat, his expression unreadable. It was Detective Nolan Hayes. Ethan swallowed hard but stood his ground. "I need answers." Nolan sighed, stepping forward. "And you think that book has them?" Ethan held the journal tightly. "I know it does." The detective studied him for a moment, then glanced at the book. "Do you even realize what you've just found?" Ethan hesitated. "I was hoping you could tell me." Nolan exhaled slowly. "That journal belonged to someone who disappeared 20 years ago. And every person who's tried to find out what happened to them." He trailed off, his gaze dark. Ethan's grip tightened. "They vanished too, didn't they?" Nolan nodded. "You still want to read it?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I have to." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, the detective pulled out a chair and sat down. "Then let's do this together." Then placed the journal between them, flipped the first page, and started reading. Little did they know, someone was watching from the shadows. The rain drummed against the car's roof as Jordan Carter sat in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel. The parking lot was nearly empty, except for a few dimly lit streetlights flickering in the distance. His heart pounded. He had seen something he wasn't supposed to. Taking a deep breath, Jordan reached for his phone. His fingers trembled as he scrolled through his contacts, hesitating before pressing call. "Ring ring, Jordan?" A deep voice answered. "Detective Reeves, I need to talk." "Now." A pause. Then, "Where are you?" Jordan looked around. "Old gas station off Highway 22. Stay there." "I'm coming." He hung up, his throat dry. Every instinct told him to leave, to disappear before whoever was watching found him first. But it was too late. A shadow moved near the alley beside the gas station. Jordan's breath hitched. He wasn't alone. The figure stepped forward, their face hidden under a hood. "You shouldn't have seen that," the person said, their voice calm but threatening. Jordan clenched his jaw. "I didn't mean to." The stranger took a step closer. "Then forget it ever happened." Jordan's pulse raced. The moment he agreed, he knew he'd never be safe. He had to make a choice: stay silent and live in fear, or expose the truth and risk everything. Headlights flashed from the road. A car pulled up fast, tires screeching. Detective Reeves stepped out, his hand resting on his gun. "Step away from him," Reeves ordered. The hooded figure hesitated before slowly backing into the shadows. Within seconds, they were gone. Jordan exhaled shakily. Reeves walked up, his eyes sharp. "Start from the beginning." Jordan nodded. "You won't believe what I just saw." And with that, he told the detective everything, unaware that, somewhere in the darkness, someone was still listening. The wind howled through the empty streets as Daniel Hayes pulled his coat tighter around himself. The storm was getting worse, but he had no choice. He had to get home. His footsteps echoed in the darkness as he walked past shuttered stores and dim streetlights. Then he saw her. A woman stood alone at the bus stop, barely visible under the flickering light. Her head was lowered, her dark hair whipping around in the wind. Something about her made him uneasy. Daniel quickened his pace, but just as he passed her, she spoke. "Wait!" He froze. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. Slowly, he turned back. "Can you help me?" she asked, lifting her head. Her eyes were wide with fear. Daniel hesitated. "What's wrong?" She glanced around nervously. "Someone's following me." A chill ran down his spine. He looked over his shoulder, scanning the empty street. It was just them. No one else. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded. "I saw him earlier, watching me." Daniel exhaled. Maybe she was just imagining things. Or maybe she wasn't. A sudden sound: footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the alley behind them. The woman stiffened. "That's him." Daniel's pulse quickened. The shadow of a tall figure stretched across the pavement as someone stepped forward. The man's face was hidden under a hood. "You should both walk away," the stranger said, his voice low and dangerous. Daniel clenched his fists. "Not happening." The stranger took another step, but before anything could happen, bright headlights flooded the street. A car turned the corner fast, its tires screeching. The hooded man cursed under his breath and backed into the alley. The woman let out a shaky breath. "He's gone." Daniel turned to her. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "Thanks to you." Moment of silence passed. Then, she smiled just slightly. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Let's get out of here." As they walked away together, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Someone had been watching. And whoever they were, they would be back.